Hey there! Today I will have two sets of suspension on the bench. We'll change the oil in the fork legs and check the spring lengths. First, I undo the cap on the first shock absorber and drain the old oil. One done, so I move to the next one. As you can see, the decision to change the oil was the right one. The oil is contaminated and there's suspiciously little of it. Before I take both shorts apart, I'll leave them upside down for a while to drain as much of the oil as possible. In the meantime, I will get to the next set. The oil is still draining, so I will show you some screenshots from the service manual. All the components of the shock absorber are clearly shown here. Interestingly, in a moment you will see that in the first set, things look a bit different in my case. Alright, the oil is drained from the fork legs, and I have already taken the internals out of the first set. I'll disassemble these parts a bit more, so I can soon lay the springs from both sets next to each other. Something worth doing before removing the front suspension from the motorcycle is loosening the lower bolts while the fork legs are still mounted. That way, later on, you can undo them calmly without using much force. If you have taken a closer look at the diagram I showed earlier, you've probably already noticed where the two sets differ. The first set doesn't have a spacer sleeve that preloads the spring during fork assembly. Instead, as you can see, both springs are longer than in the second set. At first glance, you might assume the springs were changed to progressive ones. But when I searched online for progressive springs, I only found information saying they are, for example, 572 mm long. Meanwhile, in the manual, you will find the lengths I marked on the screen. Let's measure the spring lengths of both sets and things will slowly start to make sense. The measurements differ slightly from this given in the table, but let's assume that's my measurements error. It turns out the springs definitely match factory specifications. So where does the missing spacer sleeve in one of the sets come from? The devil is in the details. In the manual for suspension after 1991, there's information stating that it wasn't used in 1992. Maybe they were testing this solution at the time, and it probably didn't work out since they later returned to the concept with a spacer. Let me know how it looks in your case. Alright, time for reassembly. I am using 10W oil. For the 1992 fork leg, you'll need 386 mm of oil, so 772 mm for both. Information for all model years can also be found in the manual. When assembling the fork legs, pay attention to the spring coil density. The tighter coils go towards the bottom. Thread lockers should be used on the bottom bolt, and I am keeping the old washers. If the bolts start to loosen, I will replace them during use. What I didn't show is compressing and extending the fork leg before tightening the cap. This is to remove air bubbles trapped in the damping rod and coil. I'm not a titan, but I managed to tighten the cap by hand without using any additional tools. No point in waiting, so I move on to the next fork leg. Same amount of oil as last time. And just like before, the longer spring goes in with the tighter coils facing down. I also tightened the nuts that sit under the cap using open-end wrenches, and that should be fine. The whole assembly can go inside. I reinstall the bottom bolt and pour in the oil again. Now for the second set. In this case you will need 412 mm per fork leg, 824 mm in total. The nuts are tightened so the whole thing can go inside. The locker on the bolt and tightening it to 20 Nm. Just the oil bleeding the air and then the cap can be screwed on.
No!
Skipping the very last fork leg, everything should already be clear. Next time you'll see the removal of the bearing from the steering stem along with the installation of both triple clamps. Thanks for watching and feel free to subscribe.